Well, good afternoon, and welcome to today's Journix Project Execute webinar. Today's webinar is entitled Turning Around Failing Projects with our guest speaker, Rick Morris from R² Consulting. My name is James Bronner. I'm the Director of Marketing here at Journix, and it's my pleasure to be your MC for today's presentation. First of all, Rick and I would like to say a great big thank you to those of you who are attending today. We recognize that your time is valuable. We certainly appreciate you spending time with us. We hope that you're going to learn a lot about how to turn around failing projects. And therefore, we plan on having you back working productively here in just under an hour. A couple of housekeeping items. As an attendee today, you're going to be able to receive a full PDU for your attendance at our webinar. All you need to do is simply respond to the follow-up email that we'll send out probably tomorrow. And you can just hit reply and ask for your PDU certificate. Give us a couple of days to generate those because of the numbers that come through. So in the next couple of days, you should receive your PDU certificate. And then finally, you're going to be able to submit questions online anytime during the presentation today. I would request that you click on the Questions tab and type in your question as Rick's going through his presentation today. He's got a lot of thought-provoking items that he's going to bring forward, and so as those things pop up in your brain, go ahead and type those in, and I'll collect those, and then at the end of our time today, we'll present those questions to Rick and get some answers. Our agenda is quite straightforward. First, Rick Morris, as I said, from R² Consulting, is going to take us through today's webinar, and then we'll begin responding to your submitted questions during the Q&A time. So let's dive right on in. I'll hand over the reins to Rick.
Thank you, sir. Well, we'd first like to again echo the thanks for joining us this afternoon. Hopefully you have a good time. You know, it's very difficult sometimes to not only perform but to listen to webinars. Sometimes I know that when we begin to multitask and begin to look at emails and everything else that's going on the screen, sometimes it's not always as exciting. So I'm going to do my best to entertain you over the next 40 minutes or so, as well as educate you on some personal experiences that I've had in turning around failing projects. Now, I promise this isn't going to be the same boring old seminar that we've heard time and time again about how to turn around failing projects. The same old statistics, the same old, all the stuff that we've heard before. I'm going to try to introduce some new ideas, certainly some new theories out there, and then relate those to personal experiences that I've had out there, you know, kind of like you guys, just trying to make a living, just trying to get this thing done. You know, project management is one of the strangest professions out there. I mean, we rarely have any authority. We rarely have any decision-making abilities. And at the same time, we're told to get everything done on time, under budget, but we're not allowed to set the time, set the budget, and we're the ones that fault if it fails. I mean, it's one of the craziest things that I've seen. A lot of us will sit around there and go, where did we sign up for this profession? But at the same time, it can be one of the most exciting and rewarding professions out there, especially if you have an ability to perform it correctly, because you know what? The world can't change without project management. So let's talk about turning around failing projects. From an agenda perspective, we'll talk about how to spot a failing project, what causes projects to fail, and some real failures that I've seen and been a part of in the turnaround, as well as some lessons learned. And again, we'll leave some time for Q&A. Now, I'm going to be moving a little bit quickly today because, again, we want to make sure that we get you back and productive under an hour. And so I'm going to try to condense this to the next 40 minutes or so, try to leave some time for Q&A, and then get you back to work. So first, I'd like to go over some things that are so funny because they're so true. I mean, these are the things that I see out there time and time again. Michael Krigsman put together a list on techrepublic.com. It was phenomenal. And these are some of the things that I pulled off the list that just made me laugh. They made me laugh because they're so true. They're funny. So the first thing, you know, he said is that projects with realistic budgets and timetables, those are the ones that don't get approved. I remember running a project for this is a Fortune 50 client, and we went in there and they said, how long would it take you to accomplish this project? We said we'd be done by July. They said, well, what would it take for you to be done by April? I said, I don't know, a miracle? And they're like, no, seriously. I was like, no, seriously, it would take a miracle. And they were like, well, find a way to get it done anyway. And I mean, that's what we're forced against all the time. When we actually do put together a realistic budget and timetable, that's not the one that gets approved. The more desperate the situation, the more optimistic the progress report, right? So everything's green, no yellows, no reds. I'm working with an organization currently right now. We were talking through their status reporting. And the first thing that I pointed out is I said, I don't see any reds on the status report. And they were like, yeah, we're not allowed to put anything as red. And some of you may chuckle, some of you may be shocked by that, but I hear that more times than you would believe. We're not allowed to put anything in red. It's not allowed to be red. Then why even have a status report if we're not allowed to actually tell the truth? A user is somebody who rejects the system because it's what they asked for. That's something that's certainly, old school project managers would see. Certainly before we had the ability to do some of these Agile and Scrum type of projects where we were doing true waterfall, and it would take 1.5 years, 2 years to develop these systems, businesses would change and people's ideas would change, and even the people themselves would change, right, with turnover and everything else. And then you would actually roll out the system and say, here you go, this is what you asked for, this is what you've been waiting for 2 years. And they'd go, yeah, we don't want that anymore. How about the difference between project success and failure is a good PR company? I absolutely subscribe to that one. As a matter of fact, I found out a long time ago there was a quote by Rob Tomset. He has a book out there called Radical Project Management, one of the best books on the market, actually a book that saved my career. But one of his quotes in there says, projects fail because of context, not content. And that was a brilliant quote for me. Actually, as I started to dive into that quote, it changed everything I thought about project management. Projects generally don't fail because of what it is that you're trying to create. They fail because you didn't meet the date or the budget. And then you start to ask who selected those and who had the ability to change those. That becomes a big issue. So the difference between project success and failure is a good PR company. It's how well you're selling to your executives more so than it is how well you're actually finishing the project. My new definition for sponsor: nothing is impossible for the person who doesn't have to do it. I've been told just go figure it out so many times I can't stand it. You go in there and you go, listen, I need 5 resources or the date's going to slide. Well, just figure it out. Well, no, sir, I have figured it out. That's why I'm here in front of you. For crying out loud, we need some assistance here. I need somebody to make a decision. But these are the guys that can say, we're going to bounce things off the moon, we're going to do all this other kind of stuff, and just make it happen. That's your job, project manager. Go do it. A freeze on change melts anytime heat is applied. How about that one? So if anybody's ever had any change and change management stuff where they say, well, listen, we're not going to put any changes in on the 4th quarter until A, B, and C are done. And then the CIO all of a sudden wants something done. Then that freeze on change will melt very, very quickly. You understood what I said, not what I meant. That's great from a requirements perspective. If at first you don't succeed, rename the project. Now when I do this one live, normally I hear quite a few groans, chuckles, or even people go, yep, you nailed that one. So how many times have you seen a phase 1 or phase 2 come out of a project, or a project that was going on so far, we renamed it? So if at first you don't succeed, simply rename the project. Everyone wants a strong project manager until they get one. Now this one is an adage that I see like crazy. People will bring me in to help them build their PMOs. One of my favorite sayings to them is, do you want me to start a PMO or do you want me to start an OEPD? And they go, what do you mean? I said, well, if you want me to start a PMO, that's a project management office. That's an office that helps you set budgets, set time frames. It's a strategic resource. It's somebody that should be regarded on the executive level. Then you have what's called an OEPD, which is simply an office that executes poor decisions. This is where you give me the date, you give me the budget, I have no say, and then when I can't make it happen, it's my profession that's in trouble. And I see that all of the time. Then they'll read these trade magazines that'll say, oh, if you hire a PM or if you build a PMO, you'll get better project predictability. It's like the old adage from, if you remember when Six Sigma was the big craze. And they said if you hired a master black belt, you could save $2 million per master black belt in your organization. Almost like that master black belt would show up with a check. Now, see, people, you still have to put the work in. You still have to make long-lasting and long-term cultural changes if you want to improve your project predictability and your project management success. But people will just say, oh, no, we just need a better project manager. And when they get one and that person starts to make tough decisions known to the executives, all of a sudden they don't want that strong project manager anymore. The worst project managers can sleep at night. How about a failing project has benefits which are always spoken of in the future tense? I love that one. Projects don't fail in the end, they fail at conception. Visions are usually treatable, and again, overly ambitious projects can never fail if they have a beginning, a middle, but they don't end. See, these are familiar. Some of these may have made you chuckle. Some of these may have hit home for you. And the point is that they're so funny because they're so true. This is the status and the standard of projects these days. These are the things that we have to deal with time in and time out. As project managers, it is silly, some of the stuff that we have to put up with. So let's start talking about how do we spot one of these failing projects. We talk about 59 to 94% of projects fail. It depends on which study you read, depends on how you identify projects. But it is a crazy amount of projects that actually fail. And some of the bad signs that you'll see is poor project planning or no plan at all. See, so many of these will say, well, we don't have time to plan, we have to get started. That's your number one sign of failure right there. That's how you know for sure you're going to fail, is that you don't have a plan. How do you know what's going on? How do you know where you are if you don't have a plan? And so these people that say, well, you don't have time to do it, you got to get started, how do you know? I mean, how on earth can you even manage what's happening? Disagreement on project requirements. So you have people that argue about what a requirement's supposed to do, and then when they say, well, we'll deal with that later, that is a sure sign of failure. That is something that you need to perk up and really pick up on. Lack of team involvement. They don't show up to meetings. They haven't had a chance to bring in the requirements. These are the people that are so busy they can't get there. But then right before you go live, they drop this bomb that says, oh, did you know you have to do A, B, and C before you can put that into production? You go, no. Well, then off you go, right? So these are the types of people that can actually kill a project. But if you don't see the team getting involved, especially in requirements, personally, I watched this system go into development for 2 years. And the whole point of the system was to speed up the entry process for a certain role within this company. And when they finally rolled out the project, it added 15 minutes to each entry process for this role, where the goal was to shave 3 minutes off. And the reason why it added 15 minutes is because they didn't involve any single person who actually performed that role. They involved all the managers, and the managers thought that they all knew how it worked, and they made all these decisions. And when they rolled out, it was a huge failure. And it was basically $3.5 million down the drain, all because the team wasn't involved. Lack of a clearly defined end. You don't know how to end if you can't define the end. Unrealistic demands, right? Unrealistic demands are the biggest ones. That, to me, where the biggest unrealistic demands are made are with dates. So I'm going to give you a few kind of hints on how I deal with that. One of my favorite questions to ask when I'm given a mandated date, and we'll talk about mandated dates in a moment, but I want to go ahead and touch on this point. When I'm given a mandated date, the first question I ask is, what is the significance of the date? And that will throw so many executives. They'll go, what do you mean? And I'll go, well, is this a regulatory date? Is this a first-to-market kind of date? Is there some sort of fine if we don't hit this date? Or is that just a date that you want? And when they have to define it in those terms, 9 times out of 10, they'll say, well, that's just the date I thought I could come in on, or that's the date I'm going to give you as a goal, in which I can turn around and say, well, that's perfect. I'm going to go figure out how long this is going to take, and I'll get back to you. So it's an ability to start to introduce that context that Rob Tomset was talking about in each one of those opportunities is by asking questions that become qualifying. And I'll touch on mandated dates here in a moment as well. One of my other favorite things or things that I notice when we talk about projects that are going downhill is the failure or fear to stop or plan again. Almost every project that I saw fail always had a point where somebody asked to stop the project so that they could replan, or stop the project so they could assess where they were. And they would say, oh, no, we're so close to the finish line, we got to finish, or no, we don't have the time to stop. Anytime I've seen that happen, that project is doomed to fail. As a matter of fact, I want to introduce a new concept for you. This is brand new on the market. It's something I've just started to introduce, and it is paying dividends already for my clients that are using it. And I like to call it the halftime adjustment. Think about the Super Bowl that we just finished here. What was it like for those two coaches? Well, you know what? They put a game plan together. They worked and worked and worked. They assessed their team. They assessed the other team. They planned. They strategized. And they go out there and they play a full half of football. And at the end of that half, they take a look at the scoreboard and they decide, am I winning or am I losing? So they go back in and they make halftime adjustments. What's working? What's not working? How are these things doing? What should we change? What shouldn't we change? What should we exploit? What should we avoid? And they answer all these questions, and they make changes to their game plan to go back out into the second half and hopefully win the game. Now, when you ask about stopping to kind of plan again, most people think that that means you're going to add time to the project, but I'm saying that's not necessarily the case. If you plan a great halftime adjustment, what it allows you to do is make adjustments midterm where you still have that finite end that you're going after, but you just have a better idea of where you are. Most people don't start to get that clear rocket focus or laser focus on where the end is until you start to near the end. So what I do in a large project, if it's a 6-month project, year-long project, whatever, is I will plan a halftime adjustment right dead middle into that scope so that we have the ability to go have our halftime adjustment and still try to bring the project in on time. So what causes projects to fail? Now, again, I promised you I wouldn't run the same old list down. I'm going to show you something else. First thing I'm going to talk about is the halo effect gone crazy. Well, what is the halo effect? Well, the halo effect is just because you're good at one thing, people assume that you're going to have that same skill set and be good at something else. In fact, most promotions in today's world comes from the halo effect. Most promotions are done this way. Hey, you're a phenomenal developer. You do a great job. You're going to be a great manager of developers. Or, hey, you're so good at that, we're going to make you the manager of that department. I've seen that from time to time again. Unfortunately, most of us got into project management because we're the ones that had the spare 20 minutes to run that project at that day. One of my favorite things to do in a live presentation is ask everybody in the room, how many people are practicing project managers? And you'll see everybody raise their hand. You'll say, great, how many people came out of college wanting to be a project manager? And almost every hand will drop. And I'll go, well, that's the halo effect in action right there. We were all good at something else. Maybe we had an organized desk. Maybe we were good at reading running a meeting. Maybe we were good at scheduling something in front of an executive. Or maybe we are the persons that just had spare 20 minutes to run the project. It doesn't matter. The point is that most of us got into project management through some sort of halo effect. But it stems from this idea that anybody can do project management. And it's starting to frustrate me because project management is a profession that needs to be recognized in order to get the results that you're looking for. So let me give you an analogy that I use, especially with executives when we talk about this very thing. When they say, oh, no, we don't have enough project managers, but we just grab, other department managers to do it, when we need additional people. We'll just grab so-and-so, and they'll run the projects when we have overflow. And I'll go, really? So let me ask you a question. Do you think a CFO would walk up to a second-year person inside their company, or even walk to that very same person you're about to choose to run this project, and say, hey, you finished high school math, didn't you? Well, come close my books for the fourth quarter. Why wouldn't they do that? Well, because accounting is a profession. It is a certified profession. You go to school to learn about it. You have programs that teach you about it. You have certifications that you go after. There are rules and laws, but in the end, it's just math, isn't it? Isn't it just adding and subtracting? Aren't there even templates we could provide them to fill out? Well, it's not that simple, is it? What about an actuary? An actuary is a group of people, especially in the insurance industry. I mean, these people are celebrated in the insurance industry. These people are the ones that actually will look at the morbidity tables and all of the risk tables, and they will put you into groupings and decide how much you will pay in premiums in order to obtain the insurance products. And basically what they want to make sure of is that there's enough money that the insurance company can pay out against all of their claims, as well as make a profit at the end of the day. There's no way a CEO walks up to an actuary in the hallway and says, hey, throw me a number really quickly, I won't hold you to it. But that's the kind of stuff that happens to project managers every day. So what I like to say is just because I can add and subtract, that doesn't make me an accountant. And just because I can guess when people are going to die, that doesn't make me an actuary. So just because I can create an activity list and hold a status meeting, that doesn't make me a project manager. So stop giving a title that I've worked so hard for to Sally the secretary because she's got 20 minutes to spare. And stop lumping her statistics statistics into my statistics when you look at project failure. Projects fail because you choose the wrong people to run them. You choose people who don't even want to be project managers to run the projects, and then you turn around and say there's no value in project management when they fail. How frustrating can that be? It is time for project managers themselves to stand up and start honoring this profession for what it is supposed to be. You cannot change without project management, and you cannot change effectively unless you have a trained project manager in order to help you. So hopefully that analogy will help you guys start to understand and start to display what it is that we need to do from a project management perspective. Mandated dates. We touched on this already, but let me give you some hints. I already gave you one of my favorite questions to ask, which is, what is the significance of the date? But one of the things I'll do in an executive session is this. I'll ask these questions. I'll go, hey, gang, really quickly, what percentage of your staff is available to do projects? And they will just look at you like a deer in headlights. They go, what do you mean? And I'll go, well, I mean, everybody here has a job that they were hired for, and then everybody here performs projects. What percentage of their time is available to actually do projects? And they don't know the answer. And then I'll say, so how do you know how many projects you can do? And they don't know the answer. And then I'll say, well, then how do you know that you're able to hit the dates that you've set as mandated dates? And they don't know the answer. And so I love to go, so wait a minute. You don't even know how many projects you can do. You don't know what percentage of staff you have available to do projects, yet you still have the comfort to select dates and then turn around and question the value of project management when we don't hit it. I'm not sure exactly how that works. So there's just some nice tips for you. Stressed and overworked team members. What I like to think of from a stressed and overworked team member perspective, I think project managers are the ones that stress and overwork the team members more than anybody. And the reason being is because we don't qualify those dates. We don't fight for those mandated dates, so we just keep getting projects lumped on and lumped on and lumped on, and they're the ones that have to deal with it. Especially in the United States, man. This whole nights and weekends thing used to be an exception. Now it's the rule. I mean, I don't understand what's happened, but all of a sudden, if you're not putting in 95 hours, you're just not an American anymore. I don't understand how that works, but as the economy turns and you start to see these layoffs, I always see a 10% reduction in force, right? I never see a 10% reduction of the requirements of that force. Just that we're going to lay 10% of the people off, but all the project dates need to stay the same and all the activities need to stay the same. We're just going to do it with less people. Nobody agreed to what the project was going to be in the first place. These are the real reasons that projects fail. I mean, yes, you can go back to all these different areas, and yes, you can go back to the standard chaos theory stuff where, they talk about inexperienced project managers or lack of executive involvement and all that other stuff. But this is the real reason. We're picking the wrong people. We're picking dates that we have no point picking. We're stressing our team members out, and nobody's even agreeing on what we're supposed to be doing. Yet we turn around and get to question the value of project management. So I promised I would tell you a couple of personal stories. And again, I'm trying to make sure that we watch our time. So I've got about 15, 16 minutes or so that I'm going to continue here. So someone isn't being heard. You can see the title there. What does that mean? To me, that is the #1 cause of failure of projects, right there. When I've gone in, so I was a turnaround specialist for Xerox. So my job at Xerox for a long time was to go into the worst of the worst projects, determine what was happening, and try to turn them around. In almost every occasion, I was able to turn around the project very quickly. And how I was able to do that is just by simply going in and trying to find that team member that wasn't being heard. There's that phenomenon out there in groups. And it's actually a term that was coined back in the Bay of Pigs invasion, but was used again more recently, and I'm going to talk about that story in just a moment. But the term itself is called groupthink. It's the act or practice of reasoning or decision-making by a group, especially when characterized by uncritical acceptance or conformity to prevailing points of view. What essentially that means is somebody has an unpopular view, and they're the ones that get squashed. I told you there was a more recent time that this term was used, and that more recent time, in fact, we just hit a very big milestone for this. It was the Challenger disaster. We just hit the 25-year anniversary of that. The Challenger disaster. This was a huge, huge moment in the history of America, certainly our space program. But it didn't have to happen. It didn't have to go down that way. Now, if I ask somebody what caused the Challenger disaster, I'll get the answer, O-rings. Somebody always in the audience will know the O-rings caused the actual explosion. And that's true. That is true. In a very technical standpoint, that is true. But that's not the real reason it exploded. Now, as a matter of fact, the night before the launch, there was a huge argument between Morton Thiokol, who were the manufacturers of the O-rings, and NASA. And the biggest argument was internally within Morton Thiokol. So to briefly tell you the story, there was a gentleman by the name of Roger Beaujolais, and he was one of the engineers that used to inspect the booster rockets after launch to make sure from a quality perspective the O-rings were doing what they were supposed to do. And he noticed a disturbing trend. And as a matter of fact, what they started to figure out is that the lower the temperature of the launch time, the worse the blow-by is what they call, which is hot gas escaping the O-rings, which gave you a bigger chance for disaster. And at the time, it was forecasted to be 40 degrees on the launch of the Challenger. And the specs for the O-rings were written to be at 65 degrees because, hey, we're launching in Florida. So Roger Beaujolais said, look, at 40 degrees, if we use 40 degrees at our temperature floor, we are outside of our data range. We should not launch. We shouldn't launch. We shouldn't launch. We shouldn't launch. They had a big argument. Now, management for Morton Thiokol had another $1 million contract on the table with NASA that was unsigned at the moment. Now, NASA was basically doing their go, no-go call and came around to Morton Thiokol and they said, O-rings. And O-rings originally said, no go. They said, no launch. And NASA says, hey, you're screwing up our launch schedule, which basically says you're going to be the reason why we're going to miss another launch. And one of the other launch directors or mission directors for NASA says, Morton Thiokol, I am appalled, but I won't go against you. When he said he was appalled, that sent a message to Morton Thiokol. So Morton Thiokol asked for a 5-minute caucus offline. And the managers and the engineers started talking. Well, eventually the managers excluded the engineers from this meeting. And this is exactly what happened. This actually comes, there's a great National Explorer documentary out there about this whole piece. It's a wonderful watch. It's actually out on YouTube if you want to go see it. Just Google the Challenger disaster. But anyway, it comes down to the managers are having this meeting, and the engineers can see that the managers are starting to change their mind. So the engineers rush over there with all of the data, and they said, hey, don't do this. Look at this. Look at these pictures. Every stinking piece of data that they had said not to launch. So the managers finally had to make a decision. And it came down to Bob Lund. And Bob Lund was the vice president of engineering. And one of the managers looked right at Bob, and they say, hey, Bob, you got to take off your engineering hat and put on your management hat and make a decision. Well, what was the message we were sending there? The message is, hey, stop thinking like an engineer and start thinking like a manager whom we need this money. So what do you want to do? And he says, well, I think it's okay. I think we should launch. And so everybody makes that decision. They go to NASA and they tell NASA to launch. Now, it was 18 degrees on the actual launch. And, of course, we know what the historical significance is. The Challenger, of course, was destroyed. It was the first time we were sending teachers into space. There was all kinds of positive press that was going on, and it became one of the biggest disasters in the history of the United States. And really, it was a disaster because of profitability. It was a disaster because it would have been unpopular for Bob Lund to say, I'm going to go with my engineers and say we shouldn't launch. Now, here's the strangest part about the story. They had to appear before Congress to testify as to why the Challenger was destroyed. And basically, there was a gag order on everybody from Morton Thiokol to not say what really happened. And Roger Beaujolais just wrestled with his conscience and said he's going to tell the truth. And because he told the truth, he was dismissed from the company. Bob Lund, who actually I feel is the person responsible for allowing the Challenger to launch that day, got promoted into a more senior role. So what was the message we sent? The message that we sent was, hey, as long as you agree with us, even if disaster strikes, you're okay. And if you don't agree with us, you're out. So what do you think the culture of Morton Thiokol continues to be if somebody has an unpopular view? It's just to shut up. And unfortunately, people's lives are in danger when that occurs. It's an incredible story. Research it for your own, come to your own conclusions. But to me, from a groupthink perspective, I see this happen all the time. Now, on a less disastrous scale, I can tell you story after story of projects that I've walked into where I got the answer almost immediately. There was one where we had 88 contractors working for a large organization, and basically they had a support contract. And one of the pieces of technology that they were supporting all of a sudden began to fail. There was a lot of phone calls, a huge increase. But when I was called in, the CIO told me I had 2 weeks to solve this problem, or me and all 88 contractors that worked for the organization were going to be out. And when I showed up on site the very first day, within the first 5 minutes, I had the answer. I walked in, and these guys are literally playing cards. I mean, they've been so demoralized, they didn't even want to answer the phone anymore. And I said, guys, we got to figure out what's going on. And they said, Rick, we already know what's going on. I said, well, what is it? They said, well, they changed this piece that interfaces with the technology. They didn't allow us to test with it. It doesn't work, and that's why everybody's blowing up. And I said, well, is there a fix? They said, yeah. And I said, well, why haven't we talked about it? They said, nobody's listening to us. So I go to my management, and I said, hey, we found the answer, X, Y, and Z. And they went, oh, my God, you're a genius. How did you know that? And I was amazed. I was like, I just asked the guys. They told me. Well, it turns out that the guys did try to tell upper management. Upper management told them to basically shut up. They told them just to sit on it. And then when it got out of control, they thought maybe that was a different issue. And they didn't want to come back and admit that that was the very same issue. So groupthink set in. I can tell you story after story after story where groupthink basically prevented the real truth from coming out, and therefore the project failed. So my biggest theory of why projects fail is somebody's not being heard. Sometimes, gang, when it's wrong, and somebody's got to be able to stand up and say it. And I know that I've seen it where the projects, we talk about the phase 1s and phase 2 and all that kind of stuff. People ask me all the time, what's a sign of a mature PMO? I think the biggest sign of a mature PMO is that their stage gate processes are there to kill projects that aren't performing. If you have the ability to stop a bad project, then I know you have a great PMO. If the PMO is just there to be a stage gate process, but it's just basically a random approval, it doesn't really mean anything, then you don't have a very mature PMO. So sometimes it can't be or shouldn't be saved, right? The project's wrong. It shouldn't be saved. We should just kill it. We should just stop it. And sometimes itself, technology can be the biggest issue. A personal story that I watched, in fact, I met with several people yesterday that were a part of this project. There was a project for a bank in the South that in 1996, they decided that they were going to start something called customer relationship management. At the time, CRM wasn't even really thought of. It was more of a just kind of an idea. But somebody had the idea of, hey, we're touching our customers too much, and we're not really giving them targeted campaigns to make sure that we're increasing sales. So we're going to develop a way to do that. Now, you have Salesforce.com and all these other CRM-type systems that are out there today, but most of those didn't come around until 2001, 2002. I mean, we're talking about 1996. These guys were on a cutting edge. The problem is they chose Lotus Notes as the platform to develop this on. Well, Lotus Notes is in a relational database. Now, I'm not here to say which database is better or not. I'm just saying that Lotus Notes is not relational, which means I can't pass it an ID and know everything else behind that database just because I know that ID. So in order for it to work, you literally have to take entire segments of data and pass that. So in a relational database, if I pass the ID, then I know your address and all this other stuff. In Lotus Notes, I don't. I have to literally send the address every time. So that means the data parts were huge that they were trying to send. And again, these are cutting-edge ideas. So they spend $1 million on trying to develop this solution. They finally roll it out. And because the data is so large and so much data that they're trying to send, it crashes a branch. The branch can't accept deposits or anything like this while the application's running. Well, of course, that's bad news for a bank. So right there, they should have either changed the technology or stopped the project. But then you have that little thought that says, you know what, though? We're $1 million into this. We don't want to lose that investment, so let's just see if we can fix it. So they tried to come up with this replication scheme that would begin to limit the data that they would send, which, by the way, also starts to limit the functionality of the tool itself that they were trying to build. So they spent another $1 million. They're now into their second year. They roll it out, crashes the branch. Then they try another thing because, hey, we're $2 million into it, and we don't want to lose that investment. So they spend another half a year, another $500,000, and they still can't do it. So they finally scrap it. To this day, that bank doesn't have CRM technology. To this day, if you try to suggest it, they'll say that's a bad idea. Well, it's not a bad idea. The idea was cutting edge. It was a brilliant idea, and if they had pulled it off, they would have been, I mean, it would have been an immense impact to their business. The problem is that they couldn't make that work with the technology. But they've attached the stigma of it being a bad idea to it being technology. Look, it was just wrong. Somebody needs to stand up and admit it. Somebody needs to stand up and stop the project itself. But instead, they just said, oh, no, we got $2 million. We've got to keep going. And technology became the biggest issue. Look, when it's wrong, it's wrong. Somebody needs to just stand up and say something about it. And if you hear this, well, if we only have 2 more weeks, man, we could have solved it. That's a sure sign that that project was toast. We have this propensity to try to gloss over the facts. We have this propensity to try to say things are better than what they are. If you remember back to that, one of those idioms that we discussed in the beginning where it said, you know, the worse the project is, the more optimistic the progress report. We have an ability, our inability as project managers, to simply state that it is what it is. Look, stop sugarcoating. Sometimes you just have to make the move. Sometimes you just have to push the information back. One of the worst things I see project managers do is make a lot of the decisions themselves. And they ask the worst type of question that they can ask, which is yes or no questions. You'll come up and say, hey, I need 3 more resources. Can I have them? They go, no. Well, okay. Right? What you have to start to do is change those yes and no questions to either or questions. See, it's not just that you need 3 more resources. You need 3 more resources to hit the date that they want. If you don't get those 3 resources, what is the date going to be? So that you can go in and phrase your question as, look, I need either 3 resources or the date's going to slide to August 15th. And now my favorite question to ask, and one you should ask all the time, especially of your sponsors, what would you like to do? That's a question that needs to be in your repertoire. What would you like to do? See, we were taught early on as project managers that you own the project. And while that's true, you don't own the budget. You don't own the date. You don't own the requirements. You are simply a facilitator. Your job is to analyze it and do your best and give them outcomes. I don't know where it got off track. I don't know where it became known that project managers can guarantee a date. It is not your job to guarantee a date. It has never been your job to guarantee a date. As a matter of fact, if you could guarantee a date, you need to be in a different profession, like being a psychic or a stockbroker or someplace where you can actually make some more money. Because it is impossible to pick a date a year in the future and guarantee it. Your job is to tell them the percentage chance they have of hitting it based on data that you've been provided. And as things change, you have to continually go back and ask for decisions to ensure that they get what they want in the time frame that they want for the cost that they want. But it has never been, nor should it be, your job to guarantee it. So you have to start with this is what it is type of attitude. So you go in and you say, I need 3 resources or the date's going to slide. And what you need is a decision. Now, one of the things I will teach you is that if the decision doesn't go your way, that's okay. Simply document what you put in front of them and then use that as a basis for the next time. So if you say I need 3 resources or the date's going to slide, and they say, no, you can't have 3 resources, so you say, okay, then the date's going to slide, and then they say, no, the date can't slide. You just simply say, okay, we'll do our best. Then you document that whole conversation, and I'll tell you what changes. What changes is this. Why did the project fail? You go, really? I kind of told you months ago it was going to fail because I needed 3 more resources, but you said I couldn't have those, so we said we were going to move the date. You said I couldn't move the date, so we did our best, and this is where we are. It's very simple data, and it's something that you have to make sure that you have. One of my favorite stories of that is I had a project. It was a 9-month project. I was in the 2nd week. I announced that we were 55 hours over budget. And the sponsor goes, I mean, he was furious with me. He goes, how can you be 55 hours over budget on a project that's 9 months long and you're only in the second week? And I said, because you've asked us to do 55 hours worth of work that's outside of scope. And I asked you if you wanted us to do it even though it was outside of scope, and you said yes. And all I'm saying is that right now we're 55 hours over budget. I didn't say we have to do anything about it. I'm just giving you the facts. Now, we can watch over the next 9 months to see if I absorb those 55 hours, or we could go ahead and scope change the 55 hours in, or we could go ahead and remove 55 hours worth of scope. I'm just reporting to you the facts of where we are in the project, and where we are right now is we've expended 55 hours over what we intended. It's just my job to report this to you. And he was like, oh, okay. And so the biggest thing he would never be able to tell me is that he didn't know. He knew exactly what was going on, when it happened, and we could make better decisions as a group because we had more time to react than in the end of the project when most of this stuff becomes known. Don't be afraid to ask for what you need. If you don't get what you want, document that and move on. Sometimes, gang, it's going to be you or them that's holding the bag. And look, when the truth comes out, I'm hoping that you're on the side that told the truth versus the side that tried to gloss over it, because I can tell you it's a horrible feeling in the long run. So with about 4 or 5 minutes left of where I wanted to be, lessons learned. First, be honest at all costs, gang. It is what it is. No amount of sugarcoating, no amount of glossing over, no amount of fudging the truth is going to change the facts of what's happening. And you need to make sure that you are on the right side of those facts. You need to make sure that you're reporting them appropriately so that the project can be considered successful. For me, you have to get to the data. It truly does rule all. We're going to talk about my books in a couple of moments here, but in my books I have just chapter after chapter after chapter of how to get some of this data, how to use the data in conversations, and what to do with the data once you have it. But if I have more data than you, I'm going to win the argument. It's as simple as that. I like to use the Six Sigma process. I'm Green Belt certified. I didn't go all the way to the Black Belt. I just didn't want to spend the amount of time because I got the tool set that I wanted. The tool set that I wanted was to learn how to define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. As a matter of fact, I have a theory that most of the systems that are hot and out there, whether it be ITIL, Agile, Scrum, all of that kind of stuff, PMBOK from PMI, Six Sigma in and of itself, all of it stems from TQM. I mean, TQM and Total Quality Management was basically plan, do, check, and act. If you look at all the major systems, they all do that. The point is you define it, you measure it, you analyze the numbers, then you put something in to improve it, and then you come back and do it again, and that control mechanism is basically measuring and analyzing again. If the numbers went up, you win. If the numbers went down, you didn't, and it's time to make another change. As project managers, we like to fight sometimes just to be right, just to win a point, just to win a semantics point. And I watch project managers their credibility just go downhill every time you pick one of those battles. You don't always have to be right, and the data doesn't always have to be yours. The point is look, we've got to make sure that we're sending the right messages and that we're being the right kind of people. So if you're wrong, admit it. If you estimated wrong, say it. It's no big deal. In fact, if you're the first person to say it, it takes away a lot of the heat. I always like to say, in a project, when I know it's bad, like when I know I messed up and we're about to go into a meeting where they want to spend an hour talking about how bad of a project manager I am, I like to open the meeting going, hey, gang, first I'd like to apologize. I think I could have done A, B, and C better personally, and I'm going to strive to change that. Now, what would you like to talk about? Now, if they try to start to beat you up over that, it sounds horrible. They sound like jerks for trying to pile on. So the point is look, it's okay to admit when you're wrong. In fact, sometimes it's very beneficial to admit when you're wrong. And then finally, gang, listen to your people. In my experience, when projects fail, somebody knows why. They're just not being heard. Go find them. Go seek out the person that's not really communicating in meetings anymore, the person that seemed to be excited about the project but's not really participating anymore. Go find these people and make sure that you understand what's happening with them. Make sure that you're hearing them, because in my experience, they know what's going on. And those are your greatest asset, are those people. Some shameless promotion. I do have 3 books on the market. We just mentioned that. I've got Everything Project Management book, which is basically an introduction guide as to what project management is. I have Project Management That Works, that was written from a perspective of I'm just a standard PM. I don't have any authority. I'm not running a PMO, but I want to help change a culture, and I want to do things right. That's what Project Management That Works was about. And then October 11th of last year, we released Stop Playing Games, which is a project manager's guide to successfully navigating organizational politics. So it's a way of all these games that I'm forced to play with executives. It's how to beat them at their own games and how to be so good at the games that they don't want to play with you. That's what that book is about. It just released from RMC. From a social media perspective, I do have a blog, www.pmnetworks.com. I try to get a new posting out there at least every week. Tons of free consulting out there, gang, so please hit that. Twitter is at Rick A. Morris. My LinkedIn and Facebook is updated often, and whichever one of those media frames you like to use, you can join up with us. Just simply request it. Website is www.r2consulting.com. And then also from an email perspective, if you want to get in touch with us, some more information about what we do, to book me as a speaker, any of that information, you can email G. Huffman. Greg Huffman is my VP of Sales and Marketing. You can find him at ghuffman@r2consulting.com. And with that, I'm going to turn this back over to James to help facilitate the little Q&A.
Thanks, Rick. Boy, that's good stuff. Lots of information. Kind of feels like drinking from a fire hose. I really appreciate.
45 minutes, baby. I try to load it up.
Man, I tell you what, that's good stuff. I'm sitting here feverishly taking notes myself. For those of you that are online today, we encourage you to go ahead and submit your questions. Some of you have done so already. If you've not, go ahead and click on the Questions tab and submit your questions for Rick. We've got about 10 minutes remaining, so we should be able to get through a good number of questions here, Rick. Let's jump in with our first one. I think I'm going to try to go backwards on these because the freshest one, someone commented, Daniel commented on your book, the PM That Works. He said, gosh, you talked about how that book talks about a standard PM can influence without authority. That's a concern for me. I'm a PM that does not have authority. How do I exert that when I don't have the authority? Rick?
So that's a fantastic question. And like you know, what was frustrating to me is one of my favorite examples is Rita Mulcahy, who has passed away, but she was one of the foremost experts on risk. She had a 5-day seminar series that I had a company pay for to send me to learn how to do risk management. And so I came back, I was pumped, I'm excited, I've just got all this new knowledge, I'm ready to put it to use, and I scheduled a meeting and nobody showed up. And I'm like, what do you do now? What's the next step now? Because I can't do anything unless I have their input. So I started to look at different types of theories and different ways, and I just decided, you know what? I'm not going to fight the system. I'm not going to demand people. I'm not going to get angry, but I am going to reward those that show up, and I am going to reward those to help us. And every step of the way, I'm going to educate as to why we do it. So, for instance, I asked for a WBS meeting for this one project, a work breakdown structure, and they told me no, I couldn't have it. I asked for a team meeting to get together, and nobody showed up. And at that point, you're kind of forced with a decision. Well, one of the books that I read that made a huge impact on me was came out by Andy Crow. He talks about alpha project management, or what the top 2% know. What he did is he looked at project managers that were successful and not successful in his own criteria and tried to determine what traits did the successful ones have over the non-successful ones. And one of the ones that sounds so simple, he says that the top project managers plan twice as much. So having read that, I was like, you know what, I'm not going to just sit here and not plan. So I went door to door and met with everybody individually. If I had to sit right out in front of their cube, it didn't matter. And I got the information that I needed to build this schedule. And then when I went to publish the schedule, we were 4 months behind a mandated date that had $1 million fine attached to it if we didn't hit it. And so using the plan, I was able to find a way to get the schedule in line. And I actually had to go to the CIO. And I asked him a question. Now, the CIO that I was working for was a rule-by-fear CIO. And I said, hey, listen, I have a big problem, but I think you're the one that can help me. If I have a server on the raised floor by February 14th, then I think we'll make sure that we don't miss this date, and we'll save $1 million fine. And of course, I got what I needed, but about 4 days later, I got called in by a CIO. Now, this is the same CIO that told me he doesn't believe in project management, he doesn't believe in the PMBOK, and he thinks that we're just highly paid people that don't actually do anything. And he asked me a simple question. He said, how did you know? I said, how did I know what, sir? He said, how did you know you needed a server by February 14th or we would miss the date? And I said, just by, here, let me show you the schedule. He said, how'd you get this schedule? I said, well, I asked for a team meeting. I didn't get it, so I went door to door. And he goes, well, so you're saying if you had a team meeting that you would be able to get this faster? I said, if you give me a team meeting, I can generate something like this in a day. And all of a sudden, I got what I wanted. So the point of the story is that I still tried to follow the principles, but I didn't do it in a way that I was slamming it down people's throats. All I did is every opportunity I had the chance to do something that project management says you're supposed to do, I did it. And then I published the results, and then when people started to see the value of those results, they started asking questions as to why did you do that, what happened there, and it gave me the ability to start to educate. So in the book, The Project Management That Works, all that was about was how do you start to collect the data, and then how do you use it in conversations with executives, team members, sponsors, whomever, to make sure that you can start to educate to a point that the culture itself will begin to change. That's what that whole book is about. And it's got a lot of stories like I just shared with you there.
Good stuff. I assume it's available on Amazon, right?
It is. The only book that's not available on Amazon right now is the Stop Playing Games. RMC is holding that exclusive for about another 3 to 4 weeks. But if you go to the rmcprojectmanagement.com or the projectmanagementbookstore.com, all three of my books are available there, and they even have autographed copies and that kind of stuff as well.
Fantastic.
And they sell up at a pretty good discount.
Yeah, I was just at a PMO symposium through the PMI, and I noticed, I think they had one of your books there, but they didn't have the others, and so I'll have to look that up myself.
Yes, sir.
Here's our next question that comes in, Rick. It's from Steve. Steve says he's having trouble with weekly status meetings. He's not getting the communication he needs, and then he mentions also that he's managing a global team, which throws some additional wrenches into the system. Do you have some suggestions on how to build the communication and updates?
Absolutely. First of all, I hate status meetings. I think they're the dumbest thing ever because basically it's a license for an hour so everybody can go around the room and lie to you. And then we ask such brilliant questions as, what % complete are you? Which, they completely lie and say that they're 40% complete, but when you dig into it, you find out that they haven't started yet, but they thought they could be 80% complete the next time they asked you. So they just cut it in half and gave you an answer. So for me, this is kind of a loaded question, and it all obviously depends on culture, but I'll give you how I solved it in one area. What I did is I listed in my status report whose updates I had when I published it. So since this is going to executives, what I did is I had, here's my status, here's everything and then here's the people that had input into the status. So I had my 35 people on a team, and the 25 people that hadn't submitted their status to me when they were supposed to or didn't attend the status meeting or didn't give me the information I requested, I just simply said that I didn't have their information. And so they had, I started getting the question, why are you trying to make me look bad? I said, I'm not trying to make you look bad. It's just is what it is, right? I asked for you to get this to me by noon on Friday. You didn't get it to me, so I have to tell them that I'm actually doing you a favor because I'm letting the executives know that I haven't gotten your input into this in case they're mad about one of your deliverables. So I kind of use that as a way of gentle guidance to say, you know what, if you know what you're supposed to do, you're a professional, we're all being paid here, so get me the information you need on time. That's a big one that I do. Now, the other one is I kind of try to change up the way the status meetings go. I say, you know what, I'm not going to have an hour-long status meeting if you guys provide me this information all the time. So I almost use it as a carrot to say, here's a form I want you to fill out. You get that to me by noon on Friday, and if I have 80% of the team that does that, then we won't have a status meeting and you'll have your time back. If up to 80% of the team doesn't, then we're going to hold this meeting and I'm going to make it 2 hours and painful, and I'm going to require your attendance, or I'm going to go to your manager to see, to make sure. So there's a lot of cultural play. It's kind of a tough question. If those suggestions don't help, or if you think that your culture kind of requires a little bit of a different approach, email me a little bit more of a situation through the G. Huffman at R Square Consulting that's on your screen, and I'll see if I can give you a better answer than that.
Thanks, Rick. Well, we've got a few more minutes left and some more questions coming through. I would encourage you to continue to submit your questions. As Rick said, if for some reason we run out of time, I'd like you to go ahead and continue to submit your questions. And what we'll do is we'll send those over to Greg, and we'll get you some answers. And if you can be specific in your question rather than being broad in general, that certainly will help Greg out as he tries to pinpoint a solution. Our next question comes in from Maria. She has a question around the triple constraint. She says that she's heard people talk about it's only time, cost, and scope. Then she's heard other people talk about quality, and they throw resources in. And what's the best way to present that to management in such a way that it makes sense?
That's a fantastic question. A great question, Maria. As a matter of fact, to me, it is time, cost, and quality means the completeness of scope. Quality means how well did we meet the deliverables that we were going after. That was the way it was originally done. Then if you start to look at project management pundits and the guys that start to really dig into this, the triple constraint now, as PMBOK has it, is 6 items, right? So they have cost, schedule, quality, and then they say, well, that has to be done on a scope of work with customer satisfaction in play and risk kind of surrounding it. It just gets to be ridiculous. Here's how I do it. First of all, a lot of people will teach you how to say, well, pick 2 because one's going to slide. And if you take that approach with management, then they're going to, instantly you're telling them we're going to fail before we get started, and they don't want to hear that. The second thing you have to realize is that your executive branch, CEO, CIO, CFO, are on opposite ends of that triangle in the beginning, right? So the CIO is more concerned about schedule, the CFO is generally more concerned about cost, and the CEO is generally more concerned about the quality. So of course, you're going to get different answers from them depending on who you ask. So what I like to do is explain it this way. I say, hey, listen, gang. Basically, you have cost, schedule, and quality. My job as a project manager is to put these into balance based on what you've given me at the beginning of the project. What I need to know is which one of these is most flexible and which one of these is least flexible should something outside of our control occur. So you're not going in there and saying pick 2 because one's going to slide because we're not saying we're going to fail. All we're saying is, look, if cost is number 1, and something costs $10,000 more than we thought, which one of these do you want me to adjust, and how do you want me to bring solutions to that issue to you for a decision? So that's the way I handle it. In fact, in both books, I address that. In both PM That Works and Stop Playing Games, I address the triple constraint, but more so in PM That Works, and talks exactly through what I just said there as well.
Boy, I've heard that, a lot of different variations of that too, Rick, and that is probably the best assessment I've ever heard.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's the whole idea of negotiating, right? You're not going in saying I can or I can't. You're going in saying, okay, it's a give and take. Good stuff.
Well, and if you read Radical Project Management by Rob Tomsat, he went into thousands of projects that were considered successful and showed how you could meet the triple constraint but still have a horribly failed project. Because you could say, well, you know what, I met the cost because everybody, or I met the time because I made everybody work nights and weekends. I met the cost because everybody's on salary and I didn't pay them an extra dime for working those nights and weekends. So what happens is then 40% of your staff turns over because you burned them out. And now your ROI is trashed, but nobody looks at it from that angle. They just say, well, I met time, I met scope, I met budget, and they didn't see the end results of that. So that's where that theory started to get shaped for me.
Well, we've come to the end of our time, and Rick and I promised to have you back working productively in just under an hour, and we're right there at the top of the hour, so we're going to have to cut this off. There are some more questions coming through, so I would encourage you to go ahead and continue to submit your questions. We'll keep the session on for a few extra minutes after we close off the audio and let you continue to submit your questions, and we'll see if we can get some of those answered. We do want to, again, say thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us today. We certainly appreciate you taking your time. We treat that with value. You can advance your slide if you want there, Greg. I'm sorry, I said Rick.
Yep. And I don't think I have that last slide that you're
no
looking
problem.
for.
Yeah, that's okay.
So if you want to take control back.
No, that's all right. Listen, we just want to tell you that we've got a whole series of these webinars with great speakers like Rick presenting on various topics. If I gave you a quick overview here, the topics would be things like how to create a PMO, how to exercise and acquire project authority. Sounds like one of your great topics, Rick. Top 5 ways to alleviate the chaos of managing multiple projects. PMO strategy, discipline, and execution. We got a dozen or so of these webinars going on right now with some fantastic speakers. Would encourage you to go to our website, which is www.projectexecute, X-E-C-E-Q-T-E, and you can register for those. And again, as I mentioned, we're going to be sending out a follow-up email tomorrow, and you can request your PDU and or you can request a copy of Greg's slides. I keep calling you Greg. I'm so sorry, Rick. Rick's slides. Greg's your VP of Sales and Marketing. And so if you've missed any of the comments on the slides, you'll have access to those as well. And so, again, we want to thank you for your time today. We appreciate you spending time with us and want you to remember not to just plan, but execute your projects. Push them across the finish line. Be the best project manager you can possibly be. Everyone have a wonderful day today. Thanks again.